Most of us dream of escaping to a peaceful lake house, a place where the world slows down, the water reflects the moon, and silence feels safe. But for one family, that dream turned into a nightmare. This is a true story of what happened at a remote lake house one summer night, and once you hear it, you may never look at still water the same way again. It started with an innocent offer. A family friend had a vacation lake house in northern Minnesota. Take it for a week, they said. It's quiet, isolated, the perfect break from city life. James and his wife Emily thought it was exactly what they needed. They packed up their 2 kids, Emma 10 and Noah 7, and made the long drive upstate. The road was long, winding, lined with thick pine trees. By the time they reached the lake, the sun was already dipping behind the horizon. The house stood on the water's edge, the reflection of its dark, empty windows staring back at them from the lake like hollow eyes. The owner had left a note on the counter. Enjoy your stay. The neighbors are far out, but you may hear old fishermen calling out at night. It's normal around here. They didn't think much of it then. They should have. The first night, that first night, everything was quiet. Too quiet. James couldn't sleep. Around 1:30 a.m., he woke to a sound, a low humming. At first, he thought it was the wind, but as he moved closer to the window, he swore he could hear whispers floating over the water. It was a woman's voice, faint but desperate. Please, help. He opened the curtains and scanned the dark water. The lake looked like black glass. No boats, no lights, just silence. When he told Emily in the morning, she brushed it off. You were dreaming, she said. But James wasn't so sure. On the second day, the kids wanted to play by the water. James and Emily sat on the porch as they built sandcastles near the dock. But when Noah pointed something out, James froze. There were wet footprints leading from the lake to the steps of the house. Bare feet, small, like a child's, but they weren't theirs. Emma and Noah were still dry from head to toe. They looked around. No one was there. Emily said maybe an animal made them, but James saw it clearly. 5 toes, a human footprint. That night, the whispers returned, louder this time. On the third night, around 3 a.m., a sudden knocking echoed through the house. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. James grabbed a flashlight and opened the front door. No one was there. The footprints were back, wet and fresh, leading from the water, stopping at the front step. But this time, there was something else. A small, soaked teddy bear sitting on the mat. Neither of their kids owned it. James tossed it back toward the lake, trying to convince himself it was some cruel prank. But in his gut, he knew someone or something was coming from the lake every night. The lake story. The next morning, James drove into the nearest town. At a small diner, he asked an old man about the lake. The man's expression darkened immediately. They didn't tell you, the man said. This house, it's right where that little girl drowned, years ago. She wandered out on the dock late at night. No one saw her go in. They didn't find her body for 3 days. James felt a chill run down his spine. And now, he asked. The old man looked him dead in the eye. They say she still walks out of the water at night, looking for someone to play with. The final night, James didn't tell Emily or the kids what he learned, but that evening, he couldn't relax. As they tucked the children into bed, the wind outside picked up. The lake's surface rippled under the moonlight. At 2:55 a.m., James heard the whispers again, closer than ever. Then, the sound of wet feet slapping against wood, coming up the porch steps. The doorknob rattled. Emily grabbed the kids and backed them into the bedroom. James held the door shut as the knocking began again, louder, faster, almost angry. Then came the giggle, a child's giggle, right outside the door. Suddenly, silence. James waited an hour before daring to open the door. The porch was empty. The only sign of a visitor, the teddy bear, sitting in the middle of the living room floor, dripping wet. By dawn, they were gone. They threw their bags in the car and didn't even stop for breakfast. As James drove away, he glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. Standing at the edge of the dock was the faint silhouette of a small, dripping figure, holding the teddy bear. Watching them leave, they never returned to that lake house again. Some lake houses promise peace and quiet, but some memories never sink. If you enjoyed this creepy true story, hit like, subscribe for more real-life horror tales. Lake houses are supposed to be peaceful escapes, places where you can leave the noise of the city behind, wake to birdsong, and drift off to the sound of water hitting the shore. But sometimes, the silence hides something else. This is a real story, told to me by a man named Daniel, about what happened when his family stayed at a rented lake house in upstate New York one summer. What began as a dream vacation ended as a nightmare they'll never forget. Daniel had been stressed for months' work, bills, city traffic, everything piling on, when his wife, Laura, found a week-long rental on Stillwater Lake. It sounded like heaven. They packed up their 2 kids, Ellie 9 and Ryan 6, loaded the SUV, and drove 4 hours until the noise of the city faded into quiet backroads. The house was beautiful on the outside, 2 stories, pale blue siding, with a long wooden dock stretching out into still, dark water. But Daniel remembers something feeling off. The house just looked empty, he told me, like it was waiting for us, not welcoming us. Inside, everything smelled faintly of mildew and old wood. Family photos lined the walls, but they weren't the owner's family. They were photos of different people, all strangers. Some pictures were old, black and white, of children standing by the very same dock. Daniel assumed they were decorations, but later they'd learn otherwise. The first night, after settling in, they had dinner, played cards, and went to bed early, around 2:40 a.m. Daniel woke up thirsty. As he passed the hallway window, he saw something odd, a small figure, standing at the end of the dock. He thought it was Ellie. He opened the door, calling out softly, but when he stepped outside, the figure was gone. The dock was empty. When he checked his daughter's room, Ellie was sound asleep in bed. Daniel told himself it was a trick of the moonlight, but deep down, unease was growing. The wet footprints. The next morning, Laura found wet footprints on the kitchen floor, small, barefoot, like a child's. They led from the back door toward the hallway, then vanished. They asked the kids if they had gone outside early, but both swore they hadn't. Daniel cleaned the prints away, trying to brush it off, but a cold thought wouldn't leave his mind. Someone was inside the house while they slept. That night, they locked every door and window. It didn't help. The whispers by the water. On the 3rd evening, as they sat outside near the dock, Ellie pointed to the lake. "Daddy," she whispered, "that girl is out there again." Daniel looked, heart pounding. At first, the water seemed calm, empty, but then he saw ripples as if someone was standing waist deep far out on the lake. No boat, no swimmer, no sound, but the gentle lapping of water. Then came the whispering, faint, carried on the breeze, too soft to understand, but urgent. Laura grabbed the kids, saying it was time for bed, but none of them slept well that night. The locked room. On day 4, Ryan was exploring the upstairs hallway when he found a locked door. He asked his parents what was inside. They didn't know. That night, around 3:15 a.m., Daniel woke to a sound coming from behind that locked door, knocking, soft at first, then louder, followed by a child's voice, hoarse and muffled. "Let me in, please. Let me in." Daniel stood frozen outside the door, too terrified to answer. The knocking stopped after a few minutes, but from that night on, the doorknob rattled every time the family passed that room. The story of the missing girl. The next day, they drove into town for groceries. At the checkout, Laura mentioned the rental house. The cashier froze, then asked quietly, "You're staying at the old Briar property?" Daniel nodded. The woman lowered her voice. "Years ago, a little girl drowned there. She was only 8. Her parents left her locked inside one evening while they went into town. She got out, wandered to the dock, and never came back. Locals say she comes back every summer, looking for someone to play with, or maybe to join her in the water." Daniel felt sick. The photos on the walls, the footprints, the whispers, they weren't imagination. The last night, that evening, they decided to pack and leave in the morning. But the house wasn't done with them yet. At 3 a.m., the family was jolted awake by the sound of water rushing inside the house. When Daniel stepped into the hallway, his feet splashed down into an inch of cold water, yet no pipes had burst. The water was coming from the locked room. Suddenly, the door creaked open on its own. Inside, the room was empty, except for a small, soaked teddy bear lying on the floor, and standing by the far wall was the little girl, dripping wet, pale, hair plastered to her face. She lifted a trembling hand and pointed toward the lake. Laura screamed, grabbed the kids, and they ran to the car, speeding away without looking back. When Daniel glanced in the rearview mirror, he swore he saw the child standing on the dock, watching them leave, holding the teddy bear in her arms. Epilogue: they never went back. They later learned other renters reported the same thing's footprints. Whispers, wet toys appearing in the house. The owners have never acknowledged the haunting, but the locals say every summer, on still nights, you can see a small figure standing at the end of the dock, waiting for another family to arrive. So next time you dream of a peaceful lake house vacation, remember this story and ask yourself, what if someone is still there, waiting for you, just beneath the water surface?